Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're back to our normal format this week, joined by friend of the show, been on many times, former Senator Jason Crowell. Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be here.
Always glad to have somebody with some SEMO common sense on the show.
Even if it's from the French of the South?
Even if it is from the Paris of Southeast Missouri and Cape Girardeau. You were elected to be a delegate to the National Convention. Yeah. What did you think of the convention, and the weeks after have been a little rough?
You know, I mean, they've been a little rough on the national media. I got involved as a delegate, first time ever. Spent 12 years in elected office, never did any of that. But felt passionate enough to go and participate in the process. Went out to Cleveland. First and foremost, Cleveland, awesome city. Cleveland rocks.
Wow.
They did a great job. Uber, you know, I know it's an issue here in Missouri, but that was the way to get around. Awesome job out there. So seeing the infrastructure, seeing that city come together, friendly, welcoming, and of course the police force and the security, second to none. Wow. Wonderful, wonderful job. So I want to give compliments to Cleveland.
What did you think
Great
of the
job
speech?
they did. The speech that Trump gave was long for Trump, but I think it hit on the main issues. And this election, a lot of white noise out there. A lot of white noise. Does Trump say stuff that sounds like fingernails down a chalkboard? To me, at points, absolutely. But I support Trump 100% because of three issues. Number one, it's without debate that we need to control our southern borders. I find it very ironic that the Democrats built a wall around their convention center, and they required photo ID to vote for Hillary Clinton to get the Democratic nomination, but they opposed those two issues. I also think it's crazy that the Democratic Party is beating up Roy Blunt right now because they want to build a wall to prevent mosquitoes from coming in and the Zika virus, but they don't want to build a wall to protect our southern borders and the rest of America. So protecting our borders is important to me. I also think we need to have trade deals. There's an article on John Combest this morning that talks about after Jason Kander loses, he may be Hillary Clinton's trade representative because the unions even want to abandon the crazy trade policies that we've had that have put a deal first versus what's in America's
Nothing's
workers
been worse
first.
for organized labor than NAFTA and Obamacare. Two worst policies to ever affect it.
Yeah, and I mean, you can really make those arguments. So I think Trump is right on actually negotiating those trade deals. And the final deal, with the benefit of hindsight, history as our lesson. Going into Iraq, the Bill Kristols of the world, the neoconservatives that think that you can import or export Judeo-Christian values to the Middle East at the end of a rifle, that policy needs to be abandoned. Now, I don't agree with the way Obama has managed the war, but the Democratic Party is caught with Hillary Clinton voting for the Iraq war. They can blame George Bush all they want, but she's right there with.
It's been amazing to me in the weeks after the convention, just the blatant media bias. I mean, honestly, you could almost track when CNN started going down this road, middle of the primaries, about the time Trump wouldn't show up on their show. But after Roger Ailes left Fox News, CNN is just it's almost like a Saturday Night Live skit of liberal media bias, and now they're tanking in the ratings. Yeah,
it's starting with the partying that happened at that they called not partying. And fake news stories like the Secret Service is lecturing Trump on the Second Amendment. I mean, it is out there. Republicans know that. There is an echo chamber within the media. Trump has nuked all of that. The David Gergens of the world are on the outside looking in. They are so fearful that they're not going to be the cool kids anymore, that they are just in apoplectic shock. And Trump's not giving them the EpiPen. So they're creating stories, they're manufacturing things, and I think as long as Trump continues to communicate with the people, what the media says about how he communicates to the people doesn't really matter.
Let's talk about Eric Greitens. You were a supporter, went on.
Actually, I didn't support anybody in the primary. I had great respect for Catherine. She was the Speaker of the House when I was the floor leader.
Supporting now, though?
Yeah, absolutely. I support 100% Eric Greitens.
You've got some of the biggest conservative bona fides in the state, earned during 8 years in the Senate, of where you got to have them tested a lot. I think what you say will matter a lot. Why would a conservative vote for Eric Greitens over Chris Koster?
I think, number one, he's going to sign right to work. Right to work is a necessary policy change, particularly for Southeast Missouri, if we want to attract manufacturing. The loss of Noranda, loss of Emerson Electric, loss of all the manufacturing
He was signed right to work. Noranda reopens?
No, it's not going to be that, but you're going to have to attract another employer that's here. And I can tell you from personal experience sitting on these things, we don't even get to the interview process of attracting new manufacturing jobs because they ask one question: your state right to work or not? And when we say no, it's not, they go, thank you very much.
You spent 12 years in the state legislature, 2 of them in the minority. People forget. You're one of the few folks that can remember back in the day.
When you didn't get called on a microphone.
Big part of Eric Greitens' campaign is folks like you are corrupt. How does he move past that?
No, I think he thinks the system is corrupt. I don't think he's pointed the fingers to any individuals
You were there
that
when
are out there.
Republicans took over running the system.
Yeah, I totally agree. And many of the policy changes we did, whether it's campaign finance reform, had unintended negative consequences. I'll be the first one to tell you that it is a much better political process, in my opinion, if you have to go out and raise $300 checks from 3,000 people than a $30,000 check
As a conservative,
from one
though,
person.
You're the government telling people how to spend their money.
No, people can always spend their money. It's, are they going to give it to an individual political candidate in that amount? Now, I believe that it is worth a discussion to look at repealing the campaign finance unlimited amounts, particularly when...
Is Eric Greitens the right messenger for that?
Well, I think it's the message. I don't really care who the messenger is. I think it's the message, and it's a discussion that has to be looked at. It's an issue that has to be raised because there are negative consequences. Many people are beating up Eric Greitens right now because of anonymous donations.
You can't defend that, right?
Well, I'm not defending it, but that's the system we have under the federal government. We have to be dynamic and deal with those things that are presented to us after Citizens United. And how do we get there? With an honest, transparent discussion and putting the rules down. Now, I don't think anyone should unilaterally disarm, and I don't think you could be called a hypocrite because you advocate for a rule change and you haven't been able to make that rule change yet. It would be foolish.
Republicans have called Gen X a hypocrite for that very thing many times, though.
Well, because they don't want to unilaterally disarm. And he's not running to unilaterally disarm. It's real easy if you're not a candidate to say, I'm not going to accept any large campaign contributions.
And walk through the ballot real quick. Who wins the lieutenant governor's race?
I think Mike Parsons wins the lieutenant governor's
race. Tough race, though, right?
It's going to be a tough race. It'll be a more of a down ballot race.
Carnahan's a good candidate.
Got a great name, but that's faded.
The name of Jay Ashcroft does well, I assume, for the same reasons?
I think Jay Ashcroft will win that race.
Holly, and you're an attorney. Holly, impressive win in the primary, running against a female prosecutor with a record of prosecuting criminals. That race seems close. Holly with an edge, maybe?
I don't know. I tell you what, Holly beat Schaefer like Phelps beats the world, and that was an impressive win from an outsider. But we'll have to see. I think the AG's race it could go either way, but it is the year of the outsider.
Somebody that's maybe doesn't believe totally in Donald Trump's fiscal bona fides. Somebody that knows Eric Greitens may have been recently a Democrat. Eric Schmidt may be somebody that a younger conservative that cares about fiscal issues he can get excited about, go to a meeting, put up a sign.
Yeah, Eric is a guy that I worked with a lot. What counts to me is if you have these discussions and somebody looks you in the eye, gives you your word, you shake hands, that word is kept. And sometimes it's very difficult in Jeff City with situations changing for people to actually take a little heat for keeping the word. Eric is a guy whose word means something. That's why I support Eric. My wife and I are actually going to have him into our house at the end of September. It's the only candidate that I've ever done that for. So I
Senator,
wish Eric well.
You've said it all. I would recognize you to close, but I'm not sure that you would.
Yeah. At this time, I would.
Well, we'll be right back with our opinion maker panel. Very dapperly dressed Greg Keller will be joining us right after the break, but we'll leave you with this week's leading Missouri economic indicators.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. Time for our Opinion Maker panel. Byron Dooley running for state representative, now the official Democratic candidate in Representative Otto's seat, right?
Very excited about the race, Scott. You know, the 70th district is a great district. We've got a
Fighting 70th. Matt Lieberman, Democratic operative. Glad to have you back, sir.
Good to see you.
Greg Keller, Atlas Strategies, one of the best men that ever come on, best dressed men that ever come on our show. Glad to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Very dapper today.
Thank you.
Brandon Butler, good to have you back, sir. The Conservation Federation, pleasure to have you, sir.
Appreciate being here.
Greg Keller, I have to start off by saying I was wrong last week. I kind of thought it might go NRA for Koster and Farm Bureau neutral. They came in for Koster. What'd you think?
It's a fascinating race for governor we have right now. I mean, you have a Republican running in Eric Greitens, who has refused to kowtow to the pro-life kind of advocates that are out there, won't even fill out the Missouri Right to Life questionnaire, went against SJR 39, which made some of the pro-traditional marriage folks unhappy. So you have the Republican candidate for governor going against the most conservative elements of his party. At the same time, you have Chris Koster, the Democrat, who's racking up endorsements from all the ag groups. Like you said, he got Missouri Farm Bureau, he got Missouri Soybean just yesterday,
growers.
He got the corn growers, and now all the talk is about exactly where NRA is going to go. It's a fascinating race for governor. We haven't seen anything like it in a while.
Brandon Butler, you're very close to a lot of the ag community. You work on a lot of things together. Were you surprised by the outcome?
Really, I wasn't. I've talked to a number of people about where they were going to go, and they said, looking at Koster's record historically, how do you go against the guy? He's been with them since he was a senator.
Byron Delia, you're heading into the legislature, favored candidate. It's got to make you view some of this differently. I would assume when you see some of these groups that have always endorsed Republicans, you assume that, yeah, are they really going to be with me? When they start endorsing Democrats based on the issues, it's got to make you feel a little more confidence when they come talk to you.
Well, you know, I think that Missouri's voters are kind of purple in general, and sort of the insiders have this kind of hyper-partisanship, and we like to side up on one side, blue team or red team. But the voters really have a more of a kind of a holistic approach to these candidates. And Chris Koster, he has very reasonable, practical policies that he can defend with explanations and kind of a very you know, a quality that makes him the adult in the room, as opposed to Eric Greitens, who is just doing these commercials where he's shooting up stuff and blowing up stuff, and he's really trivializing the political debate. And I don't think that that's going to bring Missouri to higher ground, so to speak, when you have a candidate that almost assumes the trappings of a reality TV show for the highest office in the state. And that's why I think these organizations are siding with Chris Koster.
Well, what do you think the race is right now?
I think it's Chris's to lose. I think that he's got the experience. He's got a lot more cash on hand. Although Eric's got the ability to raise money, as the non-traditional candidate, I don't think that voters will, at the end of the day, vote for him.
Greg Keller, I saw the RGA came in with $1 million donation to Greitens. That's You tell me. You would know those federal PACs and how the things move out of Washington better than I would. It looks like that. Is that not a statement of their confidence in him?
I think it means that they're absolutely going to be targeting the state. I think it's not very well kept secret that the Republican Governors Association is maybe the most effective such organization in all of Washington, D.C. Excuse me, they're better funded than the DGA. I believe they're better run than the DGA. I believe that their research and the quality of the product that they're going to be putting on television is going to be better than what the Democrat Governors Association is putting up. And when you're looking at handicapping this race, you got to look at the national organizations as a major factor in the favor of Eric Greitens.
I mean, Brandon, it looked to me like you looked at the AG race. Honestly, it looked like donors from out of state were probably more important than donors in state almost. This race might be of a similar tone. I wonder if the Democrat Governors Association can compete with the RGA. And I also think there may be I picked up undercurrents that not only do they want to elect Eric Greitens, they would prefer Chris Koster not be a Democrat governor from Missouri.
You know, I'm not on the fundraising side of things, but one thing I've noticed from Greitens is his ability to raise money through contributors to his nonprofit, The Mission Continues. I think a lot of that's transferred over into the race as well for him. So.
Byron, it's interesting to me, the first ads that Greitens put out were a little bit softer. You didn't see a gun, an explosion, and a howitzer. You saw him talking about doing humanitarian work in all other parts of the world. I thought that was an interesting pivot, and do you think that pivot continues, or does the howitzer come out Labor Day?
You know, there's a lot of similarities between the kind of race that Donald Trump is running on the national level in terms of the sensationalizing, the whole new media aspect of this. And I think that Greitens is trying to capitalize on that by shooting a Gatling gun, by shooting machine guns.
But his first ad came out of the gate was about softer humanitarian things he's done.
Sure. And, you know, I remember seeing Eric speak at the 2009 West County Democrats. He gave the keynote address for that. And he talked about very humanist values, and he talked about these kind of issues. And to see him sort of shift to where he is now, it just doesn't seem authentic to me.
You're seeing a very conservative Chris Koster pick the pocket of some traditionally Republican groups. Do you see a more moderate Eric Greitens from the Republican side start to pick Chris Koster's pocket on some Democrat groups?
I think that kind of what Byron was speaking to is that Eric is just not going to be seen.
Do you think he's having to come too far too fast, is what you're saying?
I do.
And I think it'd be an interesting race that comes down with a softer Eric Greitens. Greg Keller, does the softer Eric Greitens, is that the message Missourians want? I mean, he certainly won the primary with the harder message you could have.
I think what you're going to see Eric Greitens run as a change agent. You're going to see him run as someone who is not a lifelong elected official. You're going to see him run as someone who is not a quote-unquote corrupt politician. I don't know that this race lines up so much as left versus right, as insider versus outsider. And if I'm doing Eric Greitens' campaign, I don't know that I want to take too hard of an ideological bent other than to say, I'm not a career politician. Jefferson City is broken. It needs an outsider to fix it, and I'm that outsider.
Speaking of that outsider, I saw some tweets begin and some social media activity with basically different groups repeating his words back and tagging Republican politicians like the Speaker of the House, Todd Richardson. I wonder how, it seems to me an interesting thing if you're Todd Richardson and you're seeing your own gubernatorial candidate's words basically calling you corrupt. Do you think that causes fissures and makes people a little bit slower to get on board?
Well, good for Todd for not retaliating. You know, that's a good thing out of the House, that we're not getting into the state politics the way we've gotten into the federal politics. But, you know, I haven't been around Jeff City all that long, but one thing I've learned is you got to learn to work with a lot of people, and he's going to have to learn to work with those folks. So maybe be a little more careful on, you know, the words that are coming out if you're going to have to form relationships with those people for a long time.
Give me a quick prediction. Do you believe this is a 5-point race right now?
Yeah.
Either way?
Yeah.
Greg Keller, do you think, we saw some really early IVR polling, do you think this is about a 5-point race right now?
Yep.
Do you think the race is within 5 points? Do you think Koster got a bigger lead?
I think Koster's got a much bigger lead.
Where's the race at? You think 5 points? You think Koster has a little bit larger?
You know, I think it's it might turn out to be larger as people get tired of some of these kind of antics. But, you know, to speak to Brandon's point, you know, the aspect of getting along with folks in Jefferson City, I mean, when you think about how Eric came into this race, he pretty much threw a pox on everybody in Jefferson City, and Jefferson City is controlled by Republicans. So I think that really starts to point towards some fractures at the center of your party. Are the insider Republicans in Jefferson City really ready to pull behind Greitens? They may prefer Chris Koster at the end of the day.
One legislator who heard his speech was impressed by his speech at the House Republican caucus, but they said it may be a Missouri insider versus a Washington insider at the end of the day. I wonder how it'll be, obviously the most interesting race of our lifetime. Let's talk about something else that voters will be voting on when they go to the polls to vote in this governor's race. It's a soil and water tax. This is an issue every week we're going to talk about one of these statewide ballot measures. Brandon, you're the expert on it. What does this do?
So the state park soil and water tax funds our state parks and our 114 soil and water conservation districts across the state. This tax is nothing new. It was first passed in '84. It was renewed in '88. It was renewed in '96. It was renewed in 2006, and it's up for renewal again in November. It's very, very important for maintaining our state parks, as well as soil and water health across the state. What's really neat about this tax, it's truly a unifying ballot measure. The two groups that are kind of out front leading this is the Conservation Federation and the Farm Bureau. So you've got the conservation community and the ag community completely together on this, and it looks real positive, but we must get everybody out to vote for this to keep our soil on the ground, our waters clean, and our state parks funded.
Greg Keller, to me, taxes are a four-letter word. We're not big on ESs in West Butler County. This one seems like something that was done under Governor Bond that may not be as controversial as some of the other ballot measures.
Yeah, and it's actually, to tell you the truth, it's one of those ballot measures that you don't hear people talk about so often. It's not one of the more controversial ones. It's not one of these taxes that get shot at by people on all sides. Seems to be fairly uncontroversial. Part of that probably has to do with the fact that it sunsets every 10 years and people kind of forget about it in the interim, except for every 10 years when it comes out.
Brian, this is not a tax that gets shot at in Jeff City very often. This is a tax that I think even a lot of conservatives, especially rural Missouri conservatives, are okay to maybe not go out and put up signs for, but let happen.
You know, we've got 88 amazing state parks in Missouri, and there was a great op-ed in the Missouri Times talking about the parks, soils, and water tax. And the author talks about maybe the most important reason for renewing this issue is the fact that it creates memories. You know, I remember as a little boy when I went to Johnson's Shut-ins and I learned how to rappel, and you had to lower yourself off the back of a cliff and put all the weight on the rope, and you really had to trust your equipment. And it was really a foundational memory for me. And so that's really what this is about. We need to ensure equal access to our state parks.
So you think this doesn't become an issue in November?
I don't think so. I mean, it's a very infinitesimal 1/10%, I believe, sales tax. It's been renewed repeatedly. And, you know, our state parks are some of the most beautiful heritage of
Matt
Missouri.
Lieberman, does this come through and not be an issue in this campaign?
It's not an issue, and I think if you look at Illinois and how their budget issues and their state parks being shut down, I agree with Byron that the state parks are important. So this money has already been allocated. It's just a renewal of. So in order to secure our state parks and the other funds that it's used for, I think it's a non-issue.
Very moment of close agreement on the opinion-making panel. Quick take, though, were you surprised that the marijuana initiative came up short and is now having to go to court?
You know, I think that they kicked out 10,000 signatures. And
did it surprise you they didn't have enough, though?
Yeah, you know, it did surprise me.
Matt, were you surprised they just didn't have enough?
For as much as they were paying per vote, yes.
Greg, I actually thought of all the things that were a foregone conclusion, this one would make it, and when it failed in St. Louis, I was a little surprised.
Yeah, I mean, who would think that medicinal marijuana legalization would fail in St. Louis, of all places, due to lack of signatures? I mean, you would think it would be another part of the state.
Do you think it's a issue with the popularity of it or the execution of the signature collecting?
Boy, it's hard to say without being on the inside, but it's one of those things, to Lieberman's point, I mean, if you're paying enough money per signature, you think you'd be able to get there. Particularly in St. Louis County, where all the houses are so close together, it's fairly easier to get these signatures in large tranches.
I was a little surprised. Of the things I assumed would move forward, I thought this would be on the ballot. I think a lot of their supporters did too.
2,200 signatures. That's what they fell short on.
People forget it's not easy to get something on the ballot, and I think the leaders in the state have made this not an easy thing to get to the ballot, and we just saw one, I think, where everyone's surprised that it didn't make it. Mm-hmm. Let's talk real quick before we head about the presidential race. Greg Keller, I clearly, if you run as a Republican, every 4 years we see a new most racist person ever, most sexist person ever, misogynistic person ever. The media just happens to find every 4 years the person who happens to win the Republican nomination is the worst person in the world.
Right.
It's a new level this year. The media is almost making a caricature of itself about Trump.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at how it impacts the Missouri ballot here, I mean, I've thought for a long time that every single person who lives in Missouri, who lives south of I-70, is going to crawl over broken glass to vote for this guy. I don't know that in many instances there's too much you can do to impact that. I think Donald Trump probably still wins this state. I think he wins it by probably 5 points.
Really?
A month
That'd be considered a little low, though, right?
A month or so ago, I
Yeah.
probably would have said 10 points, maybe even as high as 14. I think he's obviously had a very rough run a bit of late, but I still think he wins the state and is a credit to statewide Republicans.
It's been interesting to me, Brandon. I saw, it was funny, you watch he's made some stupid comments, unquestionably. The one about the Second Amendment, folks, I think it's funny. I really believe that everyone got it that supports the Second Amendment. Everyone at the NBC, ABC, CBS, the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, all the folks there that actually support the Second Amendment got it. It just happens to be there's none of them at those networks.
Yeah, well, I'm a Second Amendment proponent, of course, a hunter, gun owner. I understood it, but I can also see when those words are written, you could interpret it in other ways.
Well, when Anderson Cooper produces the segment, you can cut it however you want to. But Byron, you have to even be a little surprised at the media's is there anything that you think they wouldn't say to hurt Donald Trump's chances?
Well, I think that there's, sort of a fracturing of the media because you've got the right-wing media and you got the left-wing media and sort of there's some neutral actors. But I think this race really took a shift when Donald Trump attacked the Gold Star parents of Dr. Khan.
Clearly stupid.
And when George Stephanopoulos asked him, what kind of sacrifices have you made? And Donald Trump starts going, oh, I've made lots of sacrifices. I've been greatly successful in business, and I've created thousands and thousands of jobs. And this kind of stuff that he's saying, it just totally shows that he's completely out of touch with the American people and has no sense of empathy.
Hillary Clinton's never created a job ever.
Well, she gave 8 million children health insurance, and that's a very real thing.
I'm sorry, did she write a check for that?
She drove the S-chip health insurance.
So she took
issue.
money from everybody else against their will and paid for other people's stuff, right?
Well, the point is that Donald Trump completely lacks any sense of empathy for the people that he seeks to serve. And when he says that I alone can fix the problems of America, it just betrays this completely out of control
Do you believe that
egoism.
this race will end up a 5-point race with Trump in Missouri?
The latest poll showed Hillary down by 2 points, and then there was a Post-Dispatch poll 3 weeks ago that said that she was down by 1 point, and that has shifted from Donald Trump being up by 10 points.
Do you believe this race ends up 5 points for Trump?
No, I think actually Hillary has a chance to win Missouri. If you look back to 2008 and how close Obama came to winning Missouri.
So we agreed on nothing but one thing, which is progress for our Opinion Maker panel. So we'll be back next week right here on This Week in Missouri Politics with maybe some more agreement. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you in part by Sterling Bank.